Welcome. I am completely overwhelmed at the crowd that showed up. So thank you all for coming. I think we're all in for a really good treat tonight. Our panel is stellar, and we're going to have some great conversations. So thank you all again for showing up. Great, yeah, much better. So my name is Jamie Nesbitt. I'm co-founder of Central Oregon and a board member as well. I'm also the brainchild of Winter Pride Fest, which started. And by the looks of how things are looking here tonight, I think we're in for an amazing weekend as well. I'm only here tonight to introduce everybody else, but the one thing that I think... can I just yell? Yeah! Great. The one thing I want to do tonight, it's going to take 2 minutes, but it's super important, is just to list off our sponsors. And there is a list which tells how much community engagement Ben and Central Oregon have given in support of Winter Pride Fest. It makes me verklempt, to be honest. It's crazy. One thing also, before I say that, obviously Central Oregon is primarily an LGBTQ advocacy group, but this year with Winter Pride Fest, we wanted to expand our focus to beyond just LGBTQ, but to really enhance and bring in everybody from any marginalized community. One of the things that we did this year, a new initiative, is through our partnership with Mount Bachelor's Play Forever Foundation, we offered 26 scholarships to their Ski or Ride program. So, helping to remove any kind of financial barrier to get people outside, which is why we're all here tonight. Great. So, here's our sponsors. Please pay attention and go see them, all that sort of stuff. Ben Cultural Tourism Fund, who basically has been the foundation of Winter Pride Fest from the get-go. The Gear Fix, our title sponsor. We all know Gear Fix. Right, they've been serving Ben since 2006. We are so excited to be working with them, and we just see our interaction with Gear Fix for, into the years in the future. OregonHealthcare.gov, 4G Clinical, which provides state-of-the-art innovative software for clinical trial enrollment and randomization. OSU Cascades, an actual co-sponsor of the event tonight. Big shout out to them. Central Oregon Visitors Association, REI Co-op, Campfire Hotel, our host hotel, 7th Mountain Resort for Wigs tomorrow night. Hope to see you all there. The Source Weekly, Spork, one of Ben's best restaurants, and actually I learned this just this morning, as reported by the New York Times, culinary magic. Awesome. One more announcement before we start. I have stepped down as president of the board on Central Oregon. I'm still remaining on the board, but I want to introduce RJ Pierce, who's our new president of the board on Central Oregon.
So awesome, and I just want to say thank you all so much for being here. I greatly appreciate it. So does South Central Oregon, so does everybody here. Thank you. Thank you. All right, and now I'll be passing it over to our lovely Patagonia.
How are you doing, y'all? Good? Good. I don't know about you, but I'm a little rusty at being in person. So let's just acknowledge that tonight's going to be perfectly awkward and fun. Does that sound like a good plan? Yeah. Cool. Thanks for being in it with us, because we feel rusty too. But let's give a huge round of applause for all y'all for showing up tonight and kicking off this amazing weekend. Also, let's give a huge round of applause to Jamie and RJ and all of OCO for hosting this weekend. And let's give a huge round of applause for our incredible panelists that are here with us this evening. Cool. My name is Patty Gonia. It is an honor to host this panel and Mixer and Weekend with you all. You are here for a panel on inclusivity in the outdoors, which seems like, yes, so important. But I want to ground us in like a little bit more of why we think it's important. Raise your hand if you think that an ally made a difference in your journey in the outdoors. Yeah? It's an awful lot of us. I think it's really important that we're here tonight having these conversations about how we can all take action to make a more inclusive outdoors for people and for our planet. We're so grateful that y'all came out. We can't wait to share this time with these incredible speakers, and just really grateful that you made it here. We're going to kick this off with a little land acknowledgement of the native land we're on, as well as just talking a little bit about stolen land in general before we get into the panel. So we are on Warm Springs native land, but more than that, I think it's really important to be grounded in all of our outdoor experiences, that we are guests, not only in Mother Nature's house, but also in native land of stolen land from native people, and the people have been living here for hundreds of thousands of years. And that white people created the myth of wilderness as nature that was untouched by man, so that we could own, control, kick people off, and make it ours. And I think that it's really important to just remember that in our outdoor recreation, we have the ability to really respect the land that we're on, honor the land, get to know the history, and I think it's really important to just ground this conversation in that. So that is a little land acknowledgement. So our panel tonight is about inclusivity in the outdoors. Here is how it's gonna go down. So I'm going to ask these incredible panelists questions for about 30 minutes, and then we're gonna open it up to Q&A from you all. We invite you to be a part of this conversation, to ask us real and hard questions, to get real with this, to think how we can think action forward to create a more inclusive outdoors. And so I'm going to switch cards. We also want to recognize that all of these speakers are speaking from their own lived experiences and do not speak for a whole entire marginalized community. That was really important to us when we talked before. And so this is the way we do things. It is not the only way. It is not the right way. These are our opinions. This is what we have learned from people that are far smarter than even we are. And we are really just grateful to share this space with you all, because you all are experts in your own ways of so much of what we're talking about tonight. Okay, I did a good job on that card. Okay, so without further ado, we are going to begin by having the speakers introduce themselves. So the mic is where? Is that this side? Okay, cool. Let's start with maybe Devin at the end. Yeah. Okay, cool. And we're just going to ask for the speakers' name, pronouns, what keeps them busy in life, and what's one thing that's bringing them joy. Devin, you ready?
Sure.
Here we go.
This is
Maybe it needs to literally be turned on. Who knows?
Can you stand up, please?
Testing. Here we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hey everyone.
Hey, Devin, come over on this side. The receiver is likes this spot. So here we are.
Yeah, I'm gonna stand over here. Okay. Hi everybody. My name is Devin Faith-Tal, and my mic.
We're gonna figure this out.
Usually they do this when you speak too much and they want to cut you off. I'm gonna start again. But Devin Faith-Tal. I'm a gay Asian American immigrant filmmaker based in Portland, and very, very lucky and fortunate to have four amazing people who's on top. Hopefully you guys will all see it, 5:30 today, tomorrow, Saturday. On that note, what I really love doing is telling stories and meeting new people. And so what brings me joy right now is definitely being here in front of all you amazing folks. So thank you for coming.
Okay, can y'all hear me on this one too? Cool. Okay, Zavi, do you want to stand in that corner? It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. It's fun when chaos starts.
I love it. I love it.
Here we go.
Can you repeat what I'm going to be saying?
Name, pronouns, what keeps you busy, what's bringing you joy?
Love it. My name is Zavi or Borja. I usually just go by Zavi. I use he, him, male pronouns, and what keeps me busy are a lot of different things. I'm able to, for my day job, I work for the city of Bend as a community relationship manager with an emphasis and focus on partnerships and equity. I was also able to I founded Vámonos Outside, so shout out to Eduardo and Wesley over there. mission, and something that I'm really thankful for has been family. I think the last 2 years, I'm fortunate to have my family really close by to me, and being able to see them and be with them has been truly something special. I'm trying to take advantage of that in the best way possible, and just really foster that relationship.
Let's give it up for Doc.
Hi, I'm Leah Persicelli. Pronouns are she, hers. I'm the program director for Oregon Adaptive Sports. That's keeping me pretty busy these days, as well as raising 2 teenagers. What's bringing me joy today is 5 inches of fresh powder.
Let's give it up for Lee.
Hello, everyone. Oh my gosh, what a great crowd. So good to see you all, especially after, hashtag COVID-19. So thank you all for being here. Hi, my name is Stacy Rice. I'm a trans woman. I use she and her pronouns. I live in Portland. What keeps me busy are several things, and I do consulting around LGBTQ diversity and inclusion, especially focusing on trans competency and sharing the trans journey. I do a lot of storytelling events also in Portland. Another thing that I love is that we're here. I love Ben so much, and I love the high desert so much. So it's just such a pleasure to be here with you all. What's bringing me joy right now is that, as you can probably tell from the accent, all my family's back on the other side of the country. And I'm so happy that within another couple of weeks I'll be able to see my 4-year-old grandson for the first time since the pandemic started. So you don't realize how far 3,000 miles is until we have a pandemic. So I've got lots of joy around that, and thank you all for being here.
Hello. I feel like I'm going to be beamed up or something. I Yanshu Sutini Panar, benim babam Türkiye'den geliyor ve annem Hendis'ten geliyor. So I just introduced myself in my native and my matrilineal and my patrilineal language, so Quechua and Turkish. And I'm going to go out of order a little bit. What's bringing me joy is I'm learning Quechua for the first time. I started it a year ago now, and I feel like I can talk like a toddler. So that's great. My grandma heard me say a few things, which is awesome. She's the last fluent speaker right now, and I'm hoping to catch that on, so that's bringing me joy right now. My name is Pinar. I use they, them pronouns, and what do I do in my life? I do a lot of things. So I'm the co-founder, along with my spouse who's here, of Queer Nature, and we run programs for the LGBTQ and Two-Spirit community for nature connection, survival skills, and rites of passage. And we're based out of the Methow Valley. And another thing that's bringing me joy, I would say, is access to trans healthcare and making sure that other people also have access to it, including trans kids in Texas.
Awesome. All right, first question, y'all ready?
Cool.
Well, I heard like yes out there, but like 9 years. So this is great. Okay, so let's first start out by defining inclusive. What is inclusivity, or what does the word inclusive mean to y'all? Anyone can go first. Hop off. Yes,
Do it.
You got this. You got this. And maybe we can stand when we answer, so people can see.
For me, it means being able to show up as your true, authentic self, not having to think twice about, my or whatever identities I hold or somebody holds, and not thinking twice of that, being able to just be authentically you in a space.
Thanks, honey. Yeah, if we're feeling things, we can throw some snaps out there. This is summer camp. Okay, some of you literally shook your heads now, so that's fine. Life's a choice. Okay, Leah.
So inclusivity for me really resonates as meeting people where they're at and moving away from the idea of expectation and moving towards the idea of acceptance, creating those spaces that are a little more welcoming for everybody, and learning what that means for every group that comes to the outdoors. Take it away, Steve.
For me, I think it means that everyone is included, and that's especially for the people who have been historically excluded in conversations, places, those kind of things. So that's what it means to me.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I feel like inclusivity to me means respecting everyone's dignity, like each person's dignity, especially across difference of power and privilege. And also that, like, to me, inclusivity is also like the bare minimum in a lot of ways, you know, and there's also like, you know, justice and land back and reparations. But the first thing is to also like respect each other's dignity and be in relationship and kinship with one another.
I'm very visual, so I always think of inclusivity as this. So it's about adding. So whenever you're in a situation, it's about how you add more people or more ideas to what's happening. So, yeah.
Makes sense. You guys are so nice for clapping up here, everyone. I love us. Okay. Next question is, what makes it inclusive outdoors to each of y'all? Maybe Stacy, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I think it's about welcoming spaces and places that brings us that, actually. It's as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I mean, we're always looking for signs, I think, of you go into a new doctor or some other situation where you've never been before, looking for some little sign that says, hey, I'll be okay here. You know, I won't face any discrimination. There's so many ways that's occurred in my life, and all the way from like a doctor I'd never been to that had actually a rainbow sticker on her name tag, which is lovely. But I think it's very important that outdoor groups, organizations, folks who sell outdoor things like REI and places like that, I think that really put out in front kind of how welcoming they are. Maybe their value statement of like, okay, this is who we are, this is who we want to be in our organization or our group. I think that's so important for folks to take that step. Something happened last summer that was just, I thought was just so lovely, talking about welcoming spaces, is that I love Crater Lake dearly, and I go a lot. And on their Facebook page, follow them on Facebook. And last year during Pride Month, they actually had a post that said Happy Pride Month in Crater Lake National Park. I thought I was seeing things, actually. But then I started reading all the amazing comments that came in from all of us in the queer community talking about, thank you for doing that. Thank you for telling us that we're welcome and happy Pride. And that the National Park Service actually takes care of Stonewall, the historic site where the LGBTQ movement started. So I'm rambling, I think.
I love it, Stacy. You know, Stacy, you spoke a lot to like how people, about inclusivity outdoors, but how do you think that everyone in the audience can do that on the trail in their daily lives when they're in the outdoors? How do you think they can create an inclusive space?
Well, I think there's lots of ways, actually. I think one thing that is, when you're trying to create inclusive spaces, there's a safety component to that. As a trans woman, I'm deeply concerned about where I am at in nature. I spend a lot of time in rural places, hiking. I'm incredibly careful about where I put myself because as a trans woman, there can be some really bad consequences about that. So, so I think it's just really super. And let's also too think about just layering if you're a person of color or if you're a queer, person of color, just how much more is on that person when it comes to trying to be in safe spaces. So, I think it's important to kind of lend a friendly face, I guess, actually, when you see someone on the trail, is just to help people realize, help them see that they're welcome and they should be in that space.
Thanks for answering, Stacy. or Zavi, I have a question for you both. You're in the hot seat. What do you think is the biggest hurdle right now to an inclusive outdoors?
You want to
Who
start?
wants to start?
You start, Zavi.
What's the biggest hurdle?
Biggest hurdle. Or a few hurdles.
Yeah, there's quite a bit, and there's also a lot of good things, right? But I think for me, the biggest hurdle has been trying to work cohesively with big entities, right? I want to say, like, you know, and not like in a bad way, but like let's say a Forest Service, so like a large entity to like work with nonprofits. Nonprofits do a lot of the great work, right? I think a lot of nonprofits here are doing that work. So how do we take like that messaging and the messages that we are sharing and do that in like a cohesive and like moving forward way, or like policy way that helps propel this like mission or things that we're trying to say or like explain and help make inclusive spaces, whether it's in a workforce or being out on the trail. I think they're both two things, but it's like that's been so difficult to navigate, to be like, listen to what folks are saying and let's implement these changes in a way that's conducive for like the long term and not necessarily like fight or like question. And I think the questioning that I've run into has been not questioning out of curiosity, but questioning as like, is this really real type of thing? So I think that's been the most frustrating thing for me in like navigating these spaces for them.
Zavi, can you explain a little bit more about that? Like when you said like people questioning, are things real?
Yeah, to be in like, Ben is a perfect example. This is an outdoor playground, right? So I think a lot of folks come to like follow us outside or to myself and be like, you know, are like Spanish speaking like Latinx folks not getting outside? Like how are they not? Like it's you can go next door and like you're at a park. And it's like, yes, but also understanding the barriers associated with that. So like me explaining those barriers and having to constantly or continually explain on behalf of or for either my lived experience or trying to elevate other voices at the same time. Again, it's just exhausting. It becomes exhausting. And not to say that it's not like my or like our job, but it's like for me taking that opportunity in those spaces to help shed light on that, to try to move that forward. But it's, again, that's extremely exhausting emotionally for folks to continually explain potentially like their traumas that they're experiencing or have experienced or heard, to again try to really instill that message and drive that home.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Seriously. That's why we need allies, right?
100%.
Yeah, allies, that's what I was just thinking too. So some hurdles so I work for Oregon Adoptive Sports, and we are a nonprofit based in Bend that serves people with disabilities. So we provide life-changing outdoor experiences for people with disabilities. And so there are a lot of barriers in the outdoors, and I'm going to speak specifically to the community that I serve, which is the community of folks with disabilities. We serve people with physical disabilities, developmental, and cognitive. And then there's sometimes a crossover between all of those disabilities. And then there's certainly intersectionality with all of the communities. Disability knows, no color, no socioeconomic status. And what we have defined as an organization as some of our biggest barriers are equipment is probably number one. As a person with especially a physical disability, you often need really expensive, really specific equipment to access the outdoors. So I might just jump on my mountain bike, which is already a fairly expensive piece of equipment, but a person who maybe has been paralyzed in an accident or born with paralysis needs a hand cycle for a mountain bike, and that hand cycle might need an e-assist. And now we're climbing up to the Sprinter van of of mountain bike prices here, and so that's a barrier to access, is the equipment. And nor can I just walk into REI and buy a hand cycle, right? That is a very specialized piece of equipment. And second barrier that goes with that kind of equipment for somebody who experiences disability is the instruction. You don't generally just jump on the equipment, a sit ski, and just know how to ride it. So that takes specialized instruction, and it takes some volunteer capabilities also. So people who are really well-versed in the equipment and in supporting folks that experience disabilities. Like my friend Bruce is in the audience tonight. Bruce, you told me I could call you out. And Bruce is an awesome OAS athlete, OAS board member. Bruce is blind, and if Bruce wants to go Nordic skiing, which he is an amazing Nordic skier, it can be resource heavy for people because Bruce needs a sighted guide in order to access the outdoors. And so if we start to think about that, and as a barrier, how are we getting folks the equipment, how are we getting the instruction or the support that they need to get outside? In addition to those, accessible transportation can be really difficult for folks with disabilities. There's pretty limited public transportation available for people who experience disability. Cost, which we already kind of hit on, but financial equity, I mean, like I said, my mountain bike costs X amount of dollars, somebody else's costs XXX, and you add that to other bills that people with experience disabilities that they have to, it just continues, it's exponential. So we try to mitigate that in our organization with a lot of scholarships and providing to reduce that financial barrier. And then finally, it's the allyship. It's the making the relationships and the buy-in from the community that it's important for everybody to experience the outdoors, and what can we do to get out there and get everybody out there. So.
Thanks, David. That was amazing.
There's nothing away from me.
You want to go, Devin? Do you have an answer for
I didn't study that.
that? We love a good boundary. Yeah, you weren't even on that question. Okay, beautiful. We can move on to the next question, which is, this is for everyone. What is the best piece of advice you have on how every single person in this audience can help build a more inclusive outdoors? I don't mean to stump you all. I just think people want to know that. Yes. Okay, what is the best piece of advice for how everyone in the audience as individuals can help build a more inclusive outdoors?
I'll go first. I would say like ask. So I'm the youngest of three sons. I always say that I'm the daughter. Anyway, my oldest brother was always invited to go camping or hiking for my other uncle, and I was like, well, I want to go, and my brother was always like, well, no, you don't want to go, you can't do that, and I'm like, well, why can't I? And it was just weird that he had this preconceived notion that I didn't want to do these things, and I'm like, well, actually, I kind of want to go. So I think, I don't know why, but he had just this bias that like I didn't want to do it, and hence I wasn't part of that invited participation group. So I think learning from that, I think just didn't ask someone, not to throw my husband under the bus, but I always ask him to do stuff, and I know stuff he doesn't even want to do, but I think my point is I do live this I do live this example, which is I do invite him, and then he can decide if he wants to go or not. So
Love it. Let's all give some
Yeah, I just spoke. Yeah, we can.
I love that.
I may try sitting because it's a little bit like an accessing thing for me. So I'm sorry, you can see my face right now. I'll be speaking. Yeah, so kind of, I was thinking about the last question regarding like hurdles, and one of the things that comes to my mind regarding that as someone, like kind of in my personal story is, I am neurodivergent, and there's several like neurological differences going on, but one of the things that I struggle with or have struggled with is panic attacks, and one of the hurdles for me was my nervous system, like actually having to work through my own nervous system to feel safe enough to be outside, and that is partially from my own like familial experience and like this lifetime, but also like historical trauma too, of just like as an Indigenous person, like the outdoors has like another, I mean, it's a great place of connection, yes, but it was also places in which we were persecuted and like looked, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, sought and like to be destroyed essentially, or to be annihilated. So, and I know that's heavy, but that is something that each one of our bodies can hold in our nervous systems through whatever our ancestry is. And I think that's really important to bring up as a potential hurdle. That can be the case for many marginalized communities, and I would say probably for a lot of people who struggle with mental health issues or whatever that you have in your lived experience. And so one of the things that I want to share with regards to this question is, I think around like asking, I think that that's something really beautiful. Like how do we create like relationship with one another? And one thing that has helped me a lot is there are people who have had a lot of skills with like survival skills or different kinds of skills that I'm interested in. That if you, again, like if you like Google survival skills, you'll see like a very certain amount of people who will like a demographic, you know, like Bear Grylls and like, and not people that look like me or like other people. And so there were people that, you know, might have looked like Bear Grylls who were like, hey, like, can I teach you something? And like, if you want to learn. And I was really grateful for that relationship building. So I think that's one thing that is, that I would recommend or suggest is like, okay, how can we create relationship across difference and just like reflect on ourselves of like, okay, what kind of skills do I have that I can offer to other people who may not have access to it due to different barriers, whether it's nervous system barriers or financial barriers or whatever kind of barriers. So one of the things that my spouse and I like to talk about is like the revolution will be relational, and like that's something that is really, I think, key, I guess, in what I'm trying to convey here. So that's what I'll share.
Revolution will be relational. I love it. Anyone else want to go? You, Leah?
Yeah, sure.
Go for it.
I just speaking to the representing Oregon Adaptive Sports, who in turn represents folks with disabilities, I just encourage changing our mindsets about what success might look like in the outdoors. I think that that's like a pretty key way to make things more inclusive for everybody. It doesn't mean a summit might mean, you know, a few steps in one direction, or it might mean, you know, you're nailing it and you're at the top of Pilot Butte or the top of South Sister, but that idea of success and the idea of giving everybody the dignity of taking risk. The dignity of risk is something that not everybody has that opportunity, especially in the world of disability. A lot of decisions are made for people, and so allowing folks to take the same risks we would allow anybody in our lives to take. That's all.
Thanks, Leah. Yeah.
What do you want to like?
Thank you all so much for sharing that. It's so crazy to learn that like white rich men in power created a definition of outdoorsy that's exclusionary and created a whole entire industry of it. It's so mind-blowing, right? Nuts. I'm comic relief, okay? Stacey, you want to answer?
Sure, yeah. I think another great way to help is actually just to support organizations and groups that are doing this work. Like Unlikely Hikers, I don't know if you know them or not, but it's an amazing hiking group that Jenny actually has taken nationwide for everyone. It's just an amazing group. Wild Diversity is another one that's just an incredible organization. Soul River is another one. So I think, you know, supporting groups and organizations that are really digging into this work deeply, I think would be a lovely thing to do, actually.
Thanks, Stacey. Yeah, the power of acting locally, right? The power of acting locally.
Yes.
The power of getting to know
Yes.
a local organization.
Definitely.
Zavi, do you want to answer?
Just how folks can get involved.
Yeah, what's your biggest piece of advice?
I feel
What's
weird.
your real Zavi?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about like advice, but like, I mean, I promise you, like, y'all are here. That's like step one, right? I think that's a round of applause to all of you. That's great. Yeah. Like, thank you all for like being here. You're taking the steps to get involved locally with organizations in a way that feels meaningful to you. And that can mean a multitude of ways. Doesn't mean you have to be or serve on some like board or committee. Doesn't mean maybe financially giving to an organization, but I think you are here, you're doing the work, and I just wanted to continue to encourage you on that journey, and y'all are doing it, so thank you.
Beautiful, Zavi. Can I add something? Can I add an answer? I think it's just the power of doing work collaboratively and taking action collaboratively. Like, I don't know about y'all, but the best work that I do is work that I do with people, and it's never alone. And so I think that, like, yes to everything you said, and do it with friends. Make it fun. Make an inclusive outdoors with a community that you want to make a web. So, and I see y'all doing that as well. And I see you all doing that as well. Yay! Okay. Okay. Can y'all hear me if I... Can y'all hear me? Do I have to literally do this? No. Okay. It's fine. Everything's fine. Okay. So, everyone has a role to play when it comes to the ecosystem of creating an inclusive outdoors. We need experimenters, visionaries, frontline responders, builders, caregivers, disruptors, healers, storytellers, guides, and weavers. What do you all see as your role, or maybe multiple roles, in creating an inclusive outdoors? And what are some of the skill sets that you think got you there? It's such a layered question, but it's a good one, right? Can people hear me?
Oh, great, awesome. It's the person who sat down again. Just so you know, I'll stand for a second. I'll take your faces. It just helps me to sit and ground. Yeah, so roles. I love this question because I think that it's really important to remember that humans are ecological beings, and naturally we are informed by ecosystems because we're a part of an ecosystem. So naturally our movement spaces are also ecological. So I love the idea of like having different roles because I feel like growing up being like an environmental activist, like at a young age, I was like, I have to be a frontline activist, which is amazing, by the way. I commend all of y'all. And I was like, wait, I had panic attacks all the time, and like that's not sustainable for my body. That's not my gift. And so I realized, I don't know, maybe that's relatable. But yeah, and again, like that's amazing that there are people who are incredibly gifted at that, and I just want to say that, that's amazing. And I will say for myself, as like a neurodivergent, introverted, shy little creature, I would say one of my roles is, I don't know, I mean, from the list that you were sharing, you know, weaver in some ways, like of creating spaces, and also a storyteller of sorts. But honestly, the way that I like to see it is I really relate a lot to rivers and like riparian or river systems. And the being that inspires me the most are beavers. I love beavers so much. They're amazing for multiple reasons. And one of the reasons is like they create habitat for so many other beings. And so that's who I really look up to and like hope to be like in my role and kind of see is like, okay, like how can I like create and co-create habitat for people? And one thing that I like to share too is like it's not just me alone, like it's like in community and also with my spouse, the person who I created, and we created Queer Nature together. And one of the things that my spouse and I were talking about earlier today is like beavers slow down water, and that's how they create habitat. And so one of the things that I feel like is one of the roles of Queer Nature is to help slow down people in a lot of ways, like in our imagination, and create like habitats for like imagination to flourish and like to be enchanted by nature and by ourselves and by community as queer and trans people and queer and trans people of color. And also other people and allies, by the way, not just us, but that's something that I really look up to for beavers. And also they have tails, which I'm really obsessed with because they slap the water, like, and I don't know if y'all have heard that if you've been on the river, but they'll slap the water with their tails as like a boundary. They're like, hey, it's like the original hair flip. Like, it's like, hey, they're just like, hey, I'm here. This is my like family. This is like my like the habitat that I protect. And so I just look up to them, so maybe I'll just share that I'm a beaver. And some of the skills that brought me to becoming a beaver is I don't know, I mean, I feel like, so one, I'll just share, I feel like I'm sharing a lot right now, but when I was like a teen and I guess like a young adult and like trying to figure out what I want to study, I either wanted to study like environmental studies or psychology, because I was like, okay, I really want to support the beings, the more than human world, but then humans need to get their stuff together with their mental health and like care about nature. Like that's how I wanted to go through like one or the other. And so I essentially like felt like bringing both of those together was really important. And as someone who's, I'm also a suicide survivor, and that's a huge part of like what brought me to this work is like mental health is so integral for like climate action actually. And I know for some people that might be like, what does that mean? But like everyone struggles or might experience ecological grief and like ecological anxiety. And I think, you know, as climate chaos like, you know, intensifies in its own ways, we're gonna have to like, as a community, support each other like emotionally, physically, you know, through community care. And so I think that that's one other thing that I'll just share too as like a part of the like role that I might hold and that other people also hold in this world is like creating those connections across like what might seem completely two different things. But our minds are also ecosystems, so like how do we connect that too and like support habitat for ourselves and our well-being and our souls, but also for other people. So I'll just share that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe we should ask Patagonia. What is your role, Patagonia?
I don't know. Okay, I feel like, okay, when I think about this question, there's a lot of words. There's like experimenters, visionaries, frontline responders, builders, all these things. But I think that the thing I actually want to share is that people often might view Patty as this like leader and whatever, but the real work I do is when I'm actively following other people. And that's work that I often do behind the scenes. It is daily little 1% little actions that have a huge snowball effect. And it's often, yeah, it's not seen, it's not celebrated, it's like not supposed to, because it's not about that. It's just about like doing the damn thing. Hello, we are back to this. So I think it's like, yeah, when I think of my role, it's like this dual world, right? Like I spent a month in the native lands of the Arapaho people with this incredible group of queer students. And that was like a whole entire month, and it's not for social media, it's not for this thing, it's to literally just be in deep community with each other. It's every time I'm trying to be an ally on the trail. It's every time I try to check my biases or my privilege or learn something new. So I think that, yeah, for me it's often about active following. I think that's like really my role, but then it's also to just be a professional gay outsider. And, yeah. Okay, so that's me, so now you answer.
I thought I punted that one. I actually look at the panel and I'm really humbled because these people, and a lot of you are really frontliners. And that's not ever a role that I ever saw myself. Didn't have the confidence, didn't have vocabulary, didn't have the wherewithal to do that. And so, being gay, immigrant, whatever, not speaking the language, I grew up developing a voice that I couldn't express. And so it took me 40-some years to develop that confidence and to develop that vocabulary. And so what I'm really passionate about now as a storyteller is I feel like it's my calling to amplify other people's voices. And this is why I didn't want to follow Pinar. Yeah, you can't, So I really see a lot where I could be really successful is just identifying amazing stories in people and somehow get them comfortable to talk about themselves with cameras and lights and all this chaos. And hopefully many of you will get a chance to see tomorrow and Saturday.
Plug it.
So I think I want to turn it around and ask some of you, like, what are your superhero powers? Like, is it being in the front line? Is it being in the background? Is it amplifying? Like what is that thing that you're doing, personally? So let me know at the break.
But really, you should plug when your home screening is. When is it? Where is it? Will you share with us?
Yes, thank you. Great question, Patty. It is at the Tin Pan Theater, downtown Bend. It's Who's on Top, narrated by George Takei, is screening today, tomorrow, and Saturday at 5:30 p.m. And tomorrow and Saturday, I think almost all of us from the film will be there, so if you want to come, please stay for some Q&A.
Can you tell us what it's about?
Who's on top? It is. Who's on top? Testing. Okay. Who's on top is a documentary about the emotion. It's not meant to be. Who's on top is
I should.
Who's on Top is a documentary about the emotional and psychological obstacles that 4 amazing members of the LGBTQ community have had to overcome. And it's set against the backdrop of us training and eventually climbing Mount Hood.
Yeah, all the information on the screenings is on the Out Central Oregon website for y'all. So, yeah, anyone else want to share what they think some of their roles are and some of their skills? Let's hear from Leah or Stacy. You want to go? Here, you can use.
No, this was so beautiful.
You are too. Here, Stacy, can I hand you this? Because we could use this.
Test 1, 2, 3. Well, I kind of see my role as a storyteller as well. I do writing. Like I said earlier, I do storytelling events. I got the lovely opportunity to be in the film thanks to Devin, and was able to, tell my story. Because I think telling stories is so important, because no matter what your journey, you can see something of yourself in another person's journey and story. Yeah, my journey is a trans journey. Maybe, well, what can people get out of that? Well, it's that trans people want the same thing that everybody does, love, respect, community, family. So I just think it's so important that, if we're telling stories about the outdoors or whatever, that we all do that just to share.
Leah, do you want to go?
Sure.
Okay, cool.
I'll be quick.
Great.
Should I go to this one? Okay. So my skill set, I'm a doer. I'm out there. My favorite thing to do is be with athletes in the outdoors that we are serving. But I think the skill sets that I have, the multitasking and the many hat wearing skill sets that I have, come from being a mother, and a mother to a child that has a cognitive disability. And so I feel like over the years my skill set has, I don't want to say it's so much of an educator as more of like a pin that says like, ask me. Because I want people to sort of understand the world of disability better. And I want that selfishly for the future of my own child, but I just want it because before having a kiddo like Miles, I was uncomfortable around disability and around cognitive disability specifically. And so by being literally thrown into the fire, that exposure created the skill sets that I have. And so what I want from folks is to ask me the hard questions, because you can't say anything that offends me. I'll one-up you on offense. But so I want that open communication so that we can all walk out the door like better people, more inclusive people. So I don't know what category that falls in. Just a pain in the asshole.
This is so fun. Okay, we are done with the questions that I have for the panelists, and we're gonna kick it over to y'all. I'm gonna give you a few seconds to think about it by just sharing that the format that we're going to do questions in to frame it up for y'all is we're going to let the first 2 questions be from BIPOC or trans people to give space to people from underrepresented communities, and then we're going to pass it to anyone. And the process that we'll do for the Q&A is just to not be shy and raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll do my best to call on you, and then you can share your name, your pronouns, and your question or any context you want to ask it with. And we hope that this is just fun and super casual, and I'll run up to you and we'll do this whole I'll beam you up thing, and it'll be great. Does that sound good? Okay, yay! Let's give a huge round of applause for our panelists already. One halfway through. It's 7:10, perfect. So we're gonna do Q&A for just about another like 25 minutes. Does that sound good? Okay, cool. Can we all stand up and do a little stretch first, though? Yes. Here we are. Perfect. Okay, do you guys want to know if the story about drag? Yeah? Okay, 3 people want to, so we're going to keep on that. So this wig is 3 wigs, and it was falling off my head slowly. Did y'all see that on the front? Yes. YOLO. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to start off with some Q&A. So we're going to prioritize BIPOC and trans people. If you have questions, will you raise your hand, and we would love to have you ask a question. Anybody? Yes. Okay, I'm going to walk to you. Is that okay? Cool. Let's give a round of applause for our
This question is for the panelists. The topic of intersectionality came up, and I work for an environmental organization, and I do outreach, and as we do this more equitable, inclusive work and try to tie in the environment and DEI, I often get questioned like, well, what does the environment have to do with including POC or talking about equitable work? And so I'm wondering if you can talk more about that intersectionality.
We're going to give Priscilla another round of applause. Does anyone want to answer? Maybe if I folk?
I literally just go forever.
So speak to intersectionalities around the environment and inclusivity. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly, Priscilla?
Yeah, like why does it matter?
Yeah. That's a tough question. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think so for folks, intersectionality, I think means like understanding like different communities or marginalized groups barriers or like issues, and understanding that those kind of overlap in times with other marginalized groups, and it's not about like my or like our community outweighing another community's needs? There's intersectionality within that, and how do we work together to solve some sort of like barriers or work towards more inclusive areas? In terms of why does it matter? That's tough. I don't even know if I have a good answer for that, to be honest. To me, when I think of that, and that's why one of the biggest reasons why I started like Vámonos Outside, was I understood that there's this like, people think about sustainability and or environmentalism and like stewards and stewardship and these kind of buzzwords in the environmental or outdoor world get thrown around. And I think if we, in whatever facet that is, are not included in that, then we're not able to do like that work. And I think that's something I've been able to kind of not like flip, but like really preface, like work with other organizations to get to try to understand, to be like, if we are not a part of that in some way, then we're failing and we're not being a part of that, especially when and if we've been a part of this work or a part of the environment since the beginning of time, really. So getting folks to understand that and to really educate them, I think, has been difficult, but also much needed. I hope that answered a little bit of it. And the buy-in, yeah, but it shouldn't be, to me, it shouldn't be buy-in, right? It's like, again, I think I spoke this earlier, it's like having to constantly like explain and or like convince people to be like, hey, like we're a part of this too. Like you want us to be a part of this. Like, how does that look like? Yeah.
Thank you, Zavi. That was an amazing answer.
That's such a good question. Priscilla, thank you for that question, and I feel like you have a lot of wisdom around that question that you already asked already, so just honoring the question and just you as a person who just asked that, so thank you. Let's see, I feel like one of the first things that comes into my mind is, and if folks haven't heard of this, write it down, environmental racism. So there's a lot of research already out there, I think in the environmental justice movement, the EJ movement, that speaks a lot about intersectionality and environmentalism and why it doesn't matter. And there's a lot of data as to how like BIPOC communities, especially like, well, all over the world, the global south, in Turtle Island or so-called America, are really impacted by pollution and like what is it called? Environmental illnesses. So cancer, asthma, and I'm really bad at remembering numbers, so I would recommend finding those numbers, but it's really disproportionate how much BIPOC communities are impacted by environmental illness, from pollution and like, you know, I'm trying to remember, like the off-gassing of different kinds of like coal mining, plants, etc. So that's something that I would like, if there are people who are like, oh, I need hard facts, like point into that, because that's like, there's some people need those hard facts rather than, you know, just like stories, like personal stories. So that's one thing that comes to my mind. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything in particular. I mean, to me, I want to name like intersectionality comes from this amazing Black woman, Kimberly Crenshaw, who's a lawyer, and she's the one that developed that and coined that terminology. So just wanting to like give her lots of love. Let's give like some snaps and some claps to Kimberly Crenshaw. But yeah, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to share. But one other amazing resource is like Intersectional Environmentalist has a lot of, and I'm sure you know them, but like has incredible resources regarding that and why it matters. Oh, and the other thing I was going to share is it's really important to look at towards like indigenous leadership, towards climate justice. And there's like an incredible book out, several books, but one of them is called Required Reading. And it's published by the Indian Collective, and they are an amazing group of First Nations and Native folks to Turtle Island and I think Hawaii, and different, I think it's mostly Turtle Island specific, who are talking about why Indigenous-led climate action really matters in these times right now, whether it's like wildfire tending or just different things around like desert restoration, habitat restoration. That's something that is really important to consider when considering intersectional environmentalism on stolen land, especially. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Pinar. Shall we go to the next question? Yeah. Okay, cool. Does one other BIPOC or trans person have a question?
I have a question.
Maybe we stand here so I can pick it up. We'll just travel together.
Okay.
Here we are.
So, hi everyone, my name is Sal Marquez. This question is more for Zavi. I'm curious, as a city official, and I know you've been very active in the community, what programs is the city trying to create to kind of get BIPOC community more kind of involved in outdoor activities? You know, because I'm from LA, so I know, you know, it's a big collaborative between like city official and nonprofit organization. For example, I know one big thing in LA is the transit to trail, and that has been a huge success there. You know, getting people that don't have cars or, you know, more access through public transportation, or like an example that they did, they would get like buses, like school buses. I've been on a couple of the excursions, and it's amazing to see kids from inner city that never had the opportunity. You know, I spoke to kids that never been to the beach, and they might live like 10 miles away. So what is the city of Bend, or anyone, you know, that you know from the county, from Deschutes County, what are they doing?
Sure, thank you for that question.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I think just for folks in the audience too, so like the city, the county, and the Parks District are all three different entities. So a lot of other areas, Parks Districts are usually embedded within city governments, and here in Bend, it's separate. So I have the privilege of being able to serve as your Parks Board elected official, and then I work for the city. I just want to name that those are different things. But the city, it's the city of Bend, the entity. I think creating my position as a community relations manager, focusing on emphasis on partnerships and equity, being able to work with underrepresented groups to better understand the needs. So being able to work with, you know, COID, so work with different transportation entities to try to make sure that happens, and tying that with just like agency partnerships, to where again a lot of the stuff, like my position with the city, we have now a director for diversity, which is brand new. So I think naming that like this stuff is not new for a lot of us that hold like these identities, but from an agency standpoint, and that's why I named that earlier, because it's very difficult, because this is very new things to folks in positions of power, or that wield and hold power. And so having to like explain and or get that things in policy to where, you know, that's where I feel like my role is now, and being able to have that opportunity to serve on these different boards or whatever it is in different capacities. And think to that question, like what are they doing? I think it's right now is starting these positions, starting the conversations, having that, you know, multiple agency cross-work collaboration that hasn't happened in the past, specifically and especially for underrepresented groups. So the like current council has like a lot of outlined goals within that. The Parks Board also has outlined goals within that to help align across other agencies to work and learn to try to figure out what the needs here are, and using that intersectionality to try to work towards those goals. So whether it is like, you know, transportation, just recently, and I think Pat is in here somewhere, but the Parks District did a river access plan, right? So what does river access look like? And the Parks District did a really good job of outreaching to the underserved community members to get their and our perspectives, so that they can go back and ensure that river access happens. I think that's one example, right? So now it's like trail connectivity, transportation, information, where is it at, what languages is it in? Those are all things right now that are being developed and working or moving forward in different ways. And unfortunately, from those agencies, that stuff works slow. That's what I'm really learning. And for me personally, it's been frustrating, right? Because I started in nonprofit, known for the nonprofit world, but trying to also push, but also have grace within that, because it's like being stuck or in a biennium is like you're stuck for a 2 years plan, and that's kind of what it is. And I think that's, they don't have the ability to be as nimble as nonprofits do. And similar with like a Parks District, there's capital improvement plans that are embedded 5 years in advance. So they look at stuff from a 5-year aspect and then move forward, which is again unfortunate, but I think they're doing the right thing, trying to create positions like mine now, but also being able to work within the community and organizations that are doing this work to get their feedback.
Thank you. out to everyone. Who here has a question they want to ask? Do not be shy. Raise your hand. I saw a hand way up top. Here we go. Walking up to the stairs. This is going well.
I'll jinx it.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Brittany. Hi. I use they them pronouns. I was wondering if you could speak to inclusivity, so difference between true inclusivity and tokenism, particularly in like environmental organizational leadership. Yeah, because I've seen a lot of that, and how do you avoid it?
Great. Who wants to answer first?
I have a lot of thoughts, but I literally just moved, so. Yeah, please.
Patty, can you reframe the question?
Yes. So I think the difference between tokenization and true inclusivity
Yeah.
within like positions of leadership across like environmental and other orgs. Yeah?
That's
Cool.
a great question.
See.
I had an immediate kind of thing come up, but it might be slightly different than what you shared, but it is connected. So I'll just share from my own experience that I have had the experience of being tokenized in certain organizations that either I collaborated with or that I worked with, and I think one thing that I realized, and it wasn't all of them, by the way, it was just some of them that because there's some organizations that definitely have really strong kinships too. And I would say that one thing that I realized, and I know that there's several other of my friends say, it's like, okay, well, you know what, we might not like us as BIPOC people or queer and trans people, like we can't, wait for these organizations to change, so we're just going to create our own spaces and like our own affinity-based spaces that, potentially those folks can also come to, but like how do we center our own leadership in our own, like on our own table or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'm not for tables, but like, just like in our own like beaver pond, like. So I just feel like that's something that comes up for me is like, okay, I just feel like there's so much energy that I give, that I've experienced from tokenizing, that I'm like, okay, like who am I building a relationship to in the long term? And like who do I want to? And like really coming from a relational place, because tokenization or tokenism is like extractive rather than relational. It's like extractive versus, or transactional versus reciprocal. And so that's something that I often consider like in my lens, like, oh, does this feel relational right now? Does this feel like this person is, are we building kinship, or is it just transactional? And I try to give most of my energy to other like affinity-based spaces, because those are the folks, like those are the orgs that need a lot more resources, because not a lot of resources come to like affinity-based programming. And so I think that that's my kind of tidbit, that I might have deviated a little bit from my understanding of your question. But I hope that's helpful. I'm wondering if anyone else has anything they want to share.
Zabi, you have a lot of thoughts.
I think you just shared, though. I don't want to like take up too much space.
No, this is great. Please work.
And for me, and this is just from my personal experience, I don't know right now that it's very hard to differentiate that, or if that even exists. I think for me, it's like tokenism right now, for me, it just happens. But I have the opportunity to take up a seat or take up space in like white-led or whatever that is, organization or space, to hopefully have a seat, to hopefully bring other folks along for that journey, so they don't have to experience that, or they don't have to. And I think that's going to take a lot of time, But I think for me, I don't, and it's to that point, like it has been in historically like very transactional, and it's hard to be like, do you really want me for me, or is it my identity that you're like really looking for this? And I think it's twofolded, and I think some organizations that really do struggle with that, but at the same time, it's like, I personally don't know how to move past that. And so for me, it's like I'm willing to personally, because I hold other positionalities also with it for me, to be like, okay, I can take that tokenism and hopefully shift this narrative so other folks won't have to kind of deal with that or experience less of it.
Wonderful answer. Thank you. Okay, other questions? Raise your hand. Let's get them up. Yes, Liz.
Hi, my name's Liz. I'm a speaker. I go to OSU here actually. I'm in it's called the TRAW program. It's Tourism, Recreation, and Adventure Leadership. So I'm actually en route to be an environmental leader in the world, hopefully. I'm so Jesse and Holly too. We're all in the same program. But I just wanted to ask, so I guess in our program, I see a lot of holes within it, but I'm really grateful for it because it's an amazing program. There's a lot of underrepresentation, obviously. Like, I think 90% of us are white, and I don't know anybody that's openly LGBTQ. Like, I'm pansexual, but I don't have like a certain identification with that. So I think what I want to know is, as an outdoor leader, like, how can you help me help you feel more represented without myself actually being in that realm? Like, how can I make you guys feel better, or people in general, sorry, folks to feel better being in the outdoors? Like, what can I do as a leader to make everyone feel more comfortable?
Is it hot mic?
It's a great question. Stacey, you want to go? Yeah. So, if I am reframing this wrong, you can be like, that is not it. But like as someone who comes from like a marginalized status but also holds privilege, how can you help like other people who might hold less privilege in those spaces? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that synthesized pretty much?
Yeah, I just feel like there's a lot less representation in outdoor industry in general. Like,
Yes.
even with women, like, I don't see as many, and we're treated a lot different too,
Yes.
even by professors. And so I think that that's where I'm like, well, if we're represented, I can't even imagine how many more people are underrepresented. So like, but I want to be a good leader, and I want to be able to help people feel more comfortable, and I want to open that up. So I'm just I guess more just so asking, like, what would make you feel more comfortable, like, being around people that aren't in your realm?
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I think one of the most important things is just helping people feel like they belong. They do belong in those spaces. That they do belong in the outdoors. I think a lot of us. I mean, I was very fortunate in that I grew up in the mountains in North Carolina, and so I had the Blue Ridge Mountains surrounding me, so I could get to those pretty easy. But I think a lot of folks they've not maybe had that experience. They maybe not thought of themselves actually as being someone who could lead in the outdoor space. So I think it's part of its education as well too. I think in understanding where different communities are and where they're coming from and what they're about. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey. Anyone else?
I actually think you're already doing it by asking that question. So, I mean, really, that's pretty cool. Secondly, okay, that's it.
You know what to do. You know what to do. Come on over. Amen.
This is why I'm never in front of the camera.
I just wanted to see that. No, it was question, and the fact that you're willing to be vulnerable to a group of strangers who actually feel even more vulnerable, but they're not presenting that, I think that speaks a lot, and the fact that you do want to make them feel comfortable. So I would just encourage you to continue to do what you're already doing. So keep up the good work.
Let's give a round of applause for the ladies. Okay, we're gonna do one more question. Does someone have a fun or goofy question to end it with? Fun, goofy, silly. I can always count on my ginger sister.
So I have, the phrase that pops in my head all the time is trauma-informed. And when you're dealing with intersectionality, you've got a lot of trauma that's going to pop up. And when you're outdoors, people are going to be facing a lot of their fears. So I'm wondering if you have any stories surrounding lighthearted events of helping someone overcome some of their fears that were definitely trauma-informed because of the lack of inclusivity in the outdoors.
That's a great question. You got a sassy mom story? Come on, you know you do. When were you like the sassiest you've ever been as a mom?
It's not an outdoor story. Nobody wants to hear those stories.
I think Patty should answer that question.
No! I don't have one yet. Let me think while you entertain.
Okay, Jonathan, your question was, what's a funny story about helping people overcome their trauma? I don't know. Let me think on it. I have something. I don't know. Does anyone have a
I get you like a low
Yeah.
barrier one, I suppose. I think it's not funny, or I don't know. Just being able to speak in Spanish with folks, like with youth, with kids, in their native tongue, or like, I mean, that was my first language, right? So it's like being able to take that back to that is something so simplistic, but it's something that for me growing up, my parents are both from Mexico. It was like, you know, we came to the States for you, make it as easy as possible. Like, don't speak your language, like, try to blend in as much as you can, like, we came here for you, like, don't make it harder on yourself. So being able to bring that culture piece to the trail, again, something so super simple, linguistics, being able to tie it back to like food, or be like, what'd you have for breakfast? Chilaquiles, like great, you know, what type of salsa do you like? Oh, rojo, or whatever that is. Super simple, but kind of creates that normative for not only the youth or the people involved, but hopefully for the folks that are around you, like, oh, like, I've never heard Spanish on the trail, but that's okay.
Okay, I'll share something. So I went climbing in Yosemite in full drag with my friend Jordan Cannon, who's a professional climber. And I share this with so much respect for Jordan, but Jordan and I come from like super like toxic masculine upbringings in really like masculine spaces. And so like the first kind of drag we ever learned to perform, me and Jordan both, was like straight passing drag. Like, I'm an expert at it, because I can like walk into a room and just like, well, okay, not like this, but like, I can like, whatever, like do it. But Jordan is like really new on his queer journey and just came out of the closet, and the power and the brilliance of seeing him put on a wig and climbing with me was so beautiful. And I just think about how like we gave each other like both something in that like he taught me the skill of climbing like outdoors in Yosemite, and I taught him how to wear a wig. And it was just like so gay, and like we like filmed this whole like music video on the side of the mountain in Yosemite, and like yes, it's this like super fun like thing for the internet, but it was also like just such a beautiful experience. It was amazing. And so when I think about like just the power of an invitation out there, like I invited him to be gay, and he like invited me to like learn this climbing skill, and like the power of that is so beautiful. And the final thing I'll add to that is that like I think a really powerful experience that I have often with queer people in the outdoors is we get to literally give each other the youth we never had. Like, okay, but like, yeah, it is for real a thing where like I feel like there's so much of my childhood I didn't have because I was shit-ass scared at Boy Scout summer camp and not like able to be myself, or I just never felt comfortable. So like when I go outside with queer people, it's to like have a childhood.
Story. Let's see. Well, I was thinking I have a lot of stories, but this one is actually about me a little bit, like about my own process with healing trauma. And so I recently got top surgery about almost a year ago, and and I've been moving. This isn't about top surgery necessarily, but one part of it is, in the last few years, I've had a lot of kind of like, since I've been doing a lot of healing work, sometimes that creates a lot more space for my nervous system to like, be like, oh, you can handle a little bit more stuff that you hadn't looked at. And so, from like my past or from intergenerationally. And so I've been moving through a lot of, just like, actually fear, like being outside again, which is really interesting because I felt like I healed that, but then there's again some more parts that need, I guess, to be looked at. And, this is working, okay, and to be healed, and actually this has to do with it included two other people that are here, Tiana and So, and we were in Colorado on Arapaho Ute and Cheyenne territory, and we were just done with like supporting this program that we help support annually at CU Boulder, and the youth just left. And I was just kind of in like I don't know, I've just been having some nervous system stuff come up regarding anxiety and like, not necessarily about the program, but just things that were just coming up naturally in that time. And then all of a sudden we took a break and we sat down while we were packing up. And then there were these 3 little baby squirrels that started to like run towards us, like in a formation. Like it was like really bizarre, and they were just like leapfrogging or whatever the word is, over each other, like this weird formation. And I used to be a wildlife rehabilitator, and so I worked specifically with baby squirrels. And so I was just like, oh my God, these baby squirrels, like they must, there must be something wrong for them to come directly towards us. And so I essentially we tried to like figure out if they were orphaned, and we called the wildlife rehabilitation center that I used to work at in Colorado called Greenwood Wildlife, and they were like, okay, sounds like they're orphaned because they would not come up to you, and you should try catching them and bringing them back to us, which is an hour drive away. And I was like, oh my God, this is like, I'm a Cancer, and so I'm like really into caregiving and like being like the parent for like all like creatures. And so I was like, okay, like we need to catch these little creatures, and because they're orphaned and they need help. And so essentially we started running, like, because they started walking away, like formationing away into the forest. And so we were alone, and besides just the 3 of us, and essentially I was just like, oh my God, I know how to catch them. Like we need to like grab them with our shirt. You can't just grab them like, with your hands. And so I just like flung off my shirt, and I was like, oh my God, this is the first time I'm like shirtless with top surgery. And I'm doing this like to catch these babies. And then I just like flung the shirt onto one of the babies, and I caught them, and we put them in like a little 5-gallon bucket, and we did it to like there were 3 of them, and we caught all 3 of them. But it was so funny because like our friend Tiana was like, why is this person like shirtless running in the woods trying to catch a squirrel? Like, what's going on? And we were just like, okay, we need to take care of these beings. And so to me, I guess, and so we caught them, we brought them to the wildlife rehab. They were actually the native squirrels to that area, the pine squirrels, which is really awesome. And they got released. They're like happy and healthy. They were orphaned, sadly, and we don't know why. But to me, like that kind of pointed to like, so I experienced a lot of abandonment and neglect as a child, and so I did a lot of like my own inner parenting through being out in nature, but also being a wildlife rehabilitator supporting orphaned and injured baby squirrels, actually. And so to be able to do that was like so hilarious, because I was just like running in the forest with like just trying to catch these little beings, and we were all just trying to catch them. And so that was just kind of like a trickster moment, I would say, like of self-healing, that just felt also really liberating as someone who is not used to being like shirtless right now. So, or like in my upbringing. So I hope that makes sense. Just imagine 3 little squirrels, like baby squirrels, like cuddling up to each other and dreaming, because that's what happened.
Well, y'all, I think we're ready to mix and mingle. But before that, let's give a huge round of applause for